In 2017, something happened in Paraguay that would make even the most daring Hollywood heist movies seem tame. A group of thieves managed to pull off one of the biggest bank heists in the country's history. This is the story of how they did it and the reasons behind this audacious crime. First things first, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment grab-and-go robbery. No, this was meticulously planned, with every detail thought through to ensure nothing was left to chance. The robbers knew that breaking into a bank like Banco Central wasn't going to be easy. They needed a plan that was foolproof, and they needed to execute it flawlessly. The group behind the Banco Central burglary wasn't just any gang of criminals. They were part of a larger, well-organized criminal syndicate with ties to other countries in South America. This network had been involved in numerous high-profile crimes across the continent, including drug trafficking, arms smuggling, and money laundering. The heist was just one part of their broader operations, but it was by far the most daring. The leader of the gang was a seasoned criminal known only by his alias, El Jefe. He was infamous in the criminal underworld for his ability to plan and execute complex crimes without getting caught. El Jefe wasn't just a mastermind, he was a ghost. No one really knew who he was or what he looked like. He operated from the shadows, using intermediaries to communicate his plans to the rest of the gang. El Jefe had a reputation for being meticulous. He wouldn't even consider a job unless he knew every detail of the operation, down to the number of steps from the vault to the getaway car. His network of informants and corrupt officials provided him with inside information, giving him the edge he needed to outmaneuver law enforcement. For El Jefe, this heist was as much about proving his genius as it was about the money. Constructing the tunnel was no small feat. It took months of painstaking work, carried out in total secrecy. The robbers had to ensure that the tunnel was structurally sound, well ventilated, and undetectable from above ground. To do this, they brought in experts, engineers who were either coerced or paid off handsomely to design and oversee the construction. The tunnel itself was a marvel of engineering. It stretched over 250 meters, starting from a rented house near the bank. This wasn't just any ordinary tunnel. It was reinforced with steel beams, lined with concrete, and equipped with electric lighting. The gang even installed a ventilation system to ensure fresh air could circulate through the tunnel as they worked. To avoid detection, the robbers used heavy machinery to dig the tunnel only at night, masking the noise with soundproof barriers. During the day, they posed as ordinary residents, blending into the neighborhood to avoid arousing suspicion. They also disposed of the excavated dirt carefully, transporting it to remote locations where it wouldn't be found. Once the tunnel was complete, the gang conducted a series of dry runs to ensure everything would go smoothly on the night of the heist. They rehearsed their entry and exit, timing each step to the second. Every possible scenario was considered, and contingency plans were put in place for anything that might go wrong. When the time came to execute the heist, the gang moved with military precision. They entered the bank through the tunnel they had dug, bypassing the security system entirely. It was just after midnight when they reached the vault room. The timing was perfect. Most of the bank's employees had left for the night, and the last security check had just been completed. The vault at Banco Central was state-of-the-art, equipped with biometric scanners, time-locked doors, and motion detectors. But the robbers had anticipated all of this. They had inside information about the security protocols, including the exact timing of the locks and the layout of the vault. Once inside, the robbers worked quickly and efficiently. They had brought military-grade duffel bags to carry the cash, and within a few hours, they had loaded up around $10 million in Paraguayan guaraníes. But this wasn't just about stealing the money. It was about erasing any trace of their presence. Before leaving, the gang set fire to the vault room, destroying any evidence that could link them to the crime. When the bank employees arrived the next morning, they were met with a scene of devastation. The vault had been cleaned out, the room was destroyed, and millions of dollars were missing. It didn't take long for the authorities to realize they were dealing with professionals. The scale of the operation, the level of planning, and the clean execution all pointed to a highly skilled and organized group. The police quickly launched an investigation, but they were at a loss. The tunnel was the only clue, but it led them to a dead end, literally. The robbers had collapsed part of the tunnel behind them, making it nearly impossible to trace it back to the hideout. It seemed like they had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation stalled. But then, a break in the case came when a neighbor near the rented house remembered seeing strange activity in the days leading up to the heist. They reported it to the police, who followed up on the lead. Inside the house, investigators found evidence that linked the gang to the crime. There were tools used to dig the tunnel, traces of the stolen money, and even maps of the bank's layout. With this new evidence, the police began to piece together what had happened. But catching the robbers was another matter. The gang had planned their escape just as carefully as the heist itself. They had fake identities, passports, and a network of safe houses across South America. One by one, they fled the country, splitting up to avoid detection. El Jefe, the mastermind, was never caught. Some say he retired after the heist, living out the rest of his days in luxury. Others believe he's still out there, planning his next big score. The mystery surrounding his true identity only added to his legend. So, why did these criminals go to such great lengths to pull off this heist? The answer is both simple and complicated. On the one hand, it was about the money. 10 million is a lot of cash, and it would be enough to set anyone up for life. But there was more to it than that. Paraguay, like many countries in South America, has long been plagued by economic instability, corruption, and inequality. For many people, the idea of getting rich quickly, by any means necessary, can be incredibly tempting. The robbers saw an opportunity to make a huge score, and they took it. But beyond the money, there was also the thrill of pulling off such a daring crime. The robbers were professionals, and this heist was a way for them to prove that they were the best at what they did. It was about showing the world that they could pull off something that most people would never even dream of attempting. Unfortunately for the robbers, their luck didn't last forever. The police, armed with the new evidence they had gathered, eventually managed to track down several members of the gang. One by one, they were arrested and brought to justice. Some of the stolen money was recovered, but much of it was never found. Despite the meticulous planning and near-perfect execution, the downfall of the gang came down to a combination of human error and dogged police work. After the break in the case led investigators to the rented house, they discovered that the gang had been less careful than they thought. While the robbers had destroyed much of the evidence, they overlooked a few crucial items. One of the first mistakes was a single fingerprint found on a piece of equipment left behind in the tunnel. The police ran it through their database and got a hit: a low-level criminal with a history of involvement in robberies and organized crime. This individual had been under the radar for years, but the fingerprint linked him directly to the scene of the crime. With this new lead, the police began to monitor known associates of the suspect. They tapped phones, intercepted communications, and put surveillance teams on anyone who seemed connected. Slowly but surely, the net began to close in on the gang. Another critical error was made during the gang's escape. One of the robbers had been careless with his fake identity, using the same alias that he had used in a previous operation. Immigration officials flagged the alias when he crossed the border into Brazil, leading the police to focus their efforts on tracking his movements. As the investigation intensified, the police uncovered a series of safe houses used by the gang to lie low after the heist. These locations were scattered across South America, in Brazil, Argentina, and even as far as Colombia. Inside one of these safe houses, the police found a stash of the stolen money, still in its original packaging from Banco Central. This was the breakthrough they needed. The discovery of the money led to a wave of arrests. Police in multiple countries coordinated a series of raids, rounding up members of the gang one by one. The raids were swift and decisive, catching many of the robbers off guard. Some surrendered without a fight, while others tried to escape, but were quickly apprehended. The arrest of one key member of the gang proved to be the tipping point. Under intense interrogation, he began to talk, revealing details about the planning and execution of the heist. He also provided information on El Jefe, the elusive mastermind. While he couldn't give a definitive identity for El Jefe, he offered clues that helped the police narrow down their search. Despite the arrests, El Jefe remained a step ahead. By the time the police closed in on him, he had already fled, leaving behind only traces of his existence. Some say he used his network of corrupt officials to disappear, starting a new life in a country where no one knew his name. Others believe he faked his death, ensuring that he would never be found. In the end, the Banco Central burglary of 2017 became one of the most infamous crimes in Paraguay's history. It was a heist that took months of planning, a team of professionals, and a lot of guts to pull off. But like most crimes, it eventually caught up with those who committed it. The Banco Central heist wasn't just a robbery. It was a major breach of security that exposed the vulnerabilities of banks around the globe. In the aftermath, banks in Paraguay and other countries were forced to overhaul their security systems, investing millions in new technology to prevent similar crimes. The heist also highlighted the growing influence of organized crime in South America. It showed how these criminal networks could operate across borders, using sophisticated methods to carry out large-scale operations. The incident led to increased cooperation between law enforcement agencies in different countries, as they sought to dismantle the networks behind crimes like the Banco Central burglary. Despite the arrests that were made, many questions about the Banco Central heist remain unanswered. How did the robbers obtain such detailed information about the bank's security? Were there insiders who helped them? And most importantly, where did the money go? Much of the stolen money was never recovered, and there are rumors that it was used to fund other criminal activities across the continent. Some believe that El Jefe and his gang laundered the money through legitimate businesses, making it nearly impossible to trace. The mystery surrounding the Banco Central heist has only added to its infamy. It's a story that continues to captivate people in Paraguay and beyond, a reminder of the audacity and ingenuity of those who are willing to risk everything for a shot at fortune. So, how did a group of thieves manage to steal millions from a bank in Paraguay? The answer lies in careful planning, flawless execution, and a willingness to take risks that most people wouldn't dare. But in the end, the reasons behind the crime, money, thrill, and desperation, were the same as they've always been. And while the robbers might have thought they could get away with it, the law eventually caught up with them, as it always does. This story not only serves as a testament to the brilliance of its perpetrators, but also as a warning about the lengths to which some will go in pursuit of wealth and notoriety. The Banco Central heist will go down in history as one of the most remarkable and daring crimes ever committed, a true example of how reality can sometimes be stranger and far more exciting than fiction.